Welcome to the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show with Larry Lawson. As a former career law enforcement officer and law enforcement educator, Larry focuses on the use of tried and true law enforcement investigative techniques in conducting paranormal investigations. Despite his experience and training, Larry also keeps an open mind to discussions on topics that deal with evidence that are not quite as physical in nature. Paranormal Stakeout guests are professionals in the field of the paranormal and parapsychology, conducting the investigations and research needed to further the cause of paranormal study. Larry advocates an agenda of standardization of structure and training in the field of paranormal investigation and research for the purpose of one day being able to produce the evidence needed to convince a jury of the existence of the paranormal. Whether it is ghosts, UFOs, unsolved mysteries, hauntings or cryptids, no topic is beyond the investigative reach of Larry Lawson and the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show team. Now, here is the host of the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show, Larry Lawson.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout. I'm your host, Larry Lawson, coming to you from our headquarters down in beautiful Vero Beach, Florida. And it's just like the rest of the country, it's hotter than the Dickens down here. But thanks so much for joining us tonight. I got a great show. I'll tell you who we got on in just a second, but I do want to remind everyone to check out all the other great listings of the shows on the network. xzbn.net. Go to that email or that website and you'll get to see all the great shows on the X Zone Broadcast Network. You can find out more about myself and my group at either paranormalfbi.com or indianriverhauntings.com. That will take you to our sites and show you what we're doing down here in Florida. You can also find us on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is at Indian River Hauntings 2341, and there you can take a look at a lot of our investigations and the work that we do in the world of paranormal research and investigation. But you can also get a hold of me on the network here. You can get me at paranormalstakeout.org, and you can also write questions or give me your thoughts and comments about the show at ghostguy at paranormalstakeout.org. So check us out, find out what we're doing, and just say hi. Tonight, my guest is Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. She's a Toronto-based certified clinical hypnotherapist, but she has a particular area of expertise, and that is conducting past life regression, hypnotist work with alien abductees. So we're very excited having her tonight. She's does a lot of work with past life and inner life regression, and most of it takes place in her Toronto hypnosis clinic known as Lightwork Hypnosis. Prior to hypnotherapy, she had a busy career as an actor, a dancer, and a vocalist, and she still does a lot of work in the jazz community and is also a very, very busy arts writer. So Lesley has a lot of things going, but tonight she's going to be with us. So Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, welcome to Paranormal Stakeout.
Oh, Larry, thank you so much for having me on. Boy, that introduction, I feel exhausted. I feel like Shiva with 8 arms coming out there. It's not all that intensive, believe me. It all sort of flows together. So I'm not really running from pillar to post, but thank you so much for the lovely intro. Great to be here. Sorry that you are so hot in Florida. I tell you, I would tell you, I know, I'd tell you about our lovely Canadian breeze, but I don't want to upset you. So,
well,
anyway.
You're in Canada. You're in Canada now, but you're from New York originally.
I
correct?
am. I am originally from New York City. I was born there and I lived there till I was a sort of a tween. And then my family moved to Los Angeles. And that was because my dad, who had been a jazz bassist, had decided to become a comedy writer for television. And within like a few short weeks, like the kind of thing you never hear about now, he had sold his first script to Get Smart, with Mel Brooks and all those guys. And it was just after that, it was just one thing after another, and eventually he spent many long years working with Norman Lear, and produced and wrote for All in the Family, The Jeffersons,
Wow.
Maud, Good Times. He has several Emmys for Mary Tyler Moore. So my dad, he must have had some voice must have spoken to him, because it was really kind of it must have seemed like a crazy heavy duty thing to,
Uh,
say my
It's
grandparents,
it
you know.
sounds like an exciting time, but tell us about Lesley. Tell us about your work and how you got to where you are working with alien abductees and
Oh,
regression life therapy. Tell us about you.
absolutely. Well, as you mentioned very briefly, all of my early career was about the entertainment business, and the
Mhm,
last chunk of it, I was a very busy publicist or media consultant, really for jazz artists. So, but I had found all of that work and the occasional acting work that came through. I found all of it unfulfilling, and I was really kind of having a sort of a midlife crisis. Now, I did not buy a red sports car convertible and get a girlfriend or anything like that, but my husband did say, I think you need some uh, direction.
mhm,
I know there's something that's wonderful out there for you, but so my husband was very cool guy. He bought me a past life regression with a no a very competent, hypnotherapist. So,
mhm,
and so I went through that experience. Now, what I took away from the experience was not only the recovered memories of a specific life, but the big thing that I took away was I understood that I could do that kind of work. I could use my voice in a way as a singer that would lull people into beautiful trances. I just knew I could do it. I can't
mhm.
explain it any better than that. But it was a one of those light bulb, aha types of things. So very shortly after that, I went to study with Dr. Georgina Cannon, no relation to Dolores Cannon, but equally gifted. So Georgina, who is
Mhm.
British, she lives in Canada though.
Yeah, we've had her on the show, so
Oh,
yeah,
that's right,
yeah,
beloved Jesus.
yeah.
She's, she was my teacher and my mentor,
Mhm,
and so I began studying. I took my initial, very basic hypnosis certification, which allows you to actually practice. I took that from her, and then layered upon that many other disciplines, including past life regression and interlife regression. These what we call the metaphysical processes.
mhm,
So I after I was bona fide zona fide to practice, very soon after that I had a job actually in Georgina's clinic, which was in Toronto,
mhm,
and, about once a month, maybe, someone would call in, who believed they had had some type of experience with some otherworldly being. Maybe they had missing time, maybe they felt they had implants, maybe they had, visual marks, whatever, and
mhm.
nobody wanted to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Now, these were not mentally ill people that were because I did do intake
Okay.
on some of them. These were people who essentially were leading, highly productive lives. So, I just said, "Look, these people call in, give them to me. I'll work with them somehow." So so what I did is and I did not reinvent the wheel here, please. I don't want to make it seem as if I did, but I took existing past life and other regression techniques, and I simply tailored them for working with a potential experiencer. So
Mm,
these are tried and true regression techniques, which I have simply modified to work easily um, with experiencers. Now, when someone comes to me and says that they have had an event of high strangeness, whatever that may detail, um, I do a very in-depth intake. Now, that doesn't mean that I disbelieve them. What it means is I have to be particularly careful that that I am not working with people who are suffering from mental illness.
Sure.
That's oh, go ahead.
Let me ask you a quick question, just so the audience understands. When you say you do an intake,
Yes.
that means you're doing what?
That means that I either on Zoom or some like system like we're on now, either some type
Mm-hmm.
of internet connection or on the phone as we used to do in the old days, I will have just a really in-depth talk with the person who is requesting my services, and I will ask questions not only about the specific incident, because I must tell you, somebody has to have at least partially recalled memories for me to work with them in this way. And that's a
Got you.
tip I took from my friend Kathleen Martin. She said, that's what I do. You got to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise it's out of control. So I discuss maybe the incident, maybe former incidents, and then I get into a lot of other stuff. Mood, sleep, any physical illnesses, any traumatic illnesses, traumatic experiences. I mean, I really, as I'll go as far as the person will let me, really. But what that does, it's not invasive. What it does is it gives me a picture of the individual. And if I feel, and if I even have a spidey sense that something is not right, because, mentally ill people can be highly manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
I will just say that it's not pleasant to say, but it's possible that someone could actually have been diagnosed with, say, borderline personality disorder and is not sharing that with me
Mm-hmm.
and is able to maintain some type of mood consistency for a short period of time. It's possible that someone could fool me in that way, but I try to make sure that that does not happen. So that's the intake. It's really for me to know if I can treat that person. Now, I'm not saying that if someone is manifesting some serious mental illness as we perceive
Mm-hmm.
it, that doesn't preclude that they have had a contact experience. What that means is at that point, when I know that I can't treat them legally, I have both psychologists and
Okay.
psychotherapists
That
who are
was
open to that phenomena, and I refer them on.
that was my next question.
Yeah.
How often do you encounter individuals, maybe not with psychological issues, but they're frankly they're just fakes. They're trying to make a name for themselves or fool you. And
Hmm.
does that happen very often?
I feel, and I may be wrong, but I feel that has only happened twice,
Okay.
and very early in my treatment career. I
Mhm.
and there was one guy who was acting up a storm. I mean, he should have gotten a Tony Award for his performance in my little studio at the time, and he was, claiming to be giving, birth to dragons. I mean, it was, even by my wide definition, it was out there. But I knew it was acting because
Mhm.
I'm an actor. You can't you can't fool me. So that happened one time, and then there was another time during a past life regression where I believe someone who was actually, I found out later, was quite sociopathic, was manifesting some stuff that I don't think was for real.
Okay.
So, I'm not perfect, but I tell you, I damn well do my best to make sure that my treatment is going to be helpful and healthy and benign for the
Excellent.
person I'm
Well,
working with.
we need to take our first break. That first session went fast, didn't it? So we
My
got to take our
God.
first. We've got to take our first break. So folks, stay with us. I have Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, hypnotherapist, and we'll be back in just a second after these messages.
NASA has confirmed that they have evidence of life beyond Earth.
This discovery is confirmed.
Well, let's see. We've had visitors again.
him. Currently worth mentioning.
I filmed 16 minutes on March 5th, 1994, 16 minutes of broad daylight UFO activity.
The other side, the spirit realm, is a parallel dimension which runs, which coexists with ours. And what spirits are doing is they're sending waves of frequency from that dimension to ours.
The government instituted the truth embargo. The government poured disinformation and misinformation into this field, encouraging hoaxes and any other foolishness. It created a truth vacuum that naturally was going to be filled with theories and assertions and other stuff.
The oil oligarchs and the banks and the people who are making decisions that are leading us down the wrong path.
They've undermined the research, intimidated and threatened witnesses. The government is responsible for the fact that the status of this issue is not resolved.
I'm Rob McConnell, host and executive producer of the X-Zone radio show. Now we are set to bring the amazing world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology to broadcast TV and online video with the development of X-Zone TV. X-Zone TV will now bring our loyal listeners and new viewers face to face with the most controversial and well-known personalities in the field of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. From scientists to theorists, astronauts to adventurers, celebrities, pundits, advocates, and naysayers, they'll all join our rapid-fire TV broadcast, interactive discussion, and debate. Interest in the paranormal and parapsychology has never been more intense, and it continues to grow. The truth is out there, so take a deep breath and join us as we step into the light. For more information about X-Zone TV, please contact me, Rob McConnell, directly at these coordinates, Rob McConnell at xzonetv.com.
And we are back with my guest tonight, Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. Fascinating discussion. First thing I'd like to ask you before we go on this topic, how many years of study did it take for you to reach this level?
Well, I've been a practicing hypnotherapist for approximately 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I began really working in the metaphysical and areas, which includes regressions of all types and working with individuals who have had contact experiences or believe they have. I've been doing that for around 16, 17 years.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's been, it's been a while, and I was very, very blessed and fortunate to be part of Kathleen Marden's research program that she conducted with in conjunction with MUFON, the Experiencer Research Program. So I was involved with that for 10 years. And it
Wow.
just completed fairly recently, but I also worked on the same a parallel program, essentially looking at the same things for Dr. Edgar Mitchell's group, Free Experiencers,
Mhm.
and now I'm doing the same thing with Les Velez, who was a
Oh,
very
yes.
important figure in MUFON. Les Velez is an organization called Opus, and I'm doing
Mhm.
the same thing with them. So I have always aligned myself with organizations that are research oriented, I shall say. And
Mhm.
so most of the time, I mean, when I'm getting a referral from MUFON and the investigators that I know, these people have been thoroughly vetted.
Mm.
They're not mentally ill, they are not fabricating. I can be very, very sure that I can work with these people, in an open way
Mhm.
and not be concerned about any of those issues because the vetting is so stringent. for both MUFON and Free, and also for Velez Group Opus. So
Mhm.
when I work through those organizations and with them, it takes a lot of concern
Sure.
off of me,
Well,
as I might say.
yeah. What is the goal of your therapy, your work? What are you trying to accomplish?
Healing, healing.
Okay.
First of all, I am a healer. And what I will say is many experiencers have a very specific type of PTSD. And now, although most experiences are benign, they're not always interpreted that way initially by the experiencer themselves. So I deal with a lot of really unique trauma. So my goal is through my various techniques, NLP, EMDR, whatever I'm using, that I can, in the same way I deal with, people returning from service or first line responders with PTSD, I actually use the same types of techniques. We work through the experiencers. We work through the experiences. We find them, we work through them, and then we obliterate the negativity
Mhm.
aspect.
Mhm.
And now something that's a little different from the way it would have been interpreted maybe 100 years ago is it used to be believed that individuals needed to viscerally, physically pass through a traumatic memory in order to become desensitized to it and release it. Well, we now know that that's not necessary. It's a mental exercise. So, say someone has come to me and we've uncovered a memory that, for one reason or another, is disturbing. What I will do is I will direct the client into that memory, but I will immediately turn them into an observer, as if you're watching it, for another room, and
Okay.
a kind of reactiveless observer. And that allows, and this is the magic part of hypnosis, that allows the client to transcend the experience and do it in a way that is more involving the higher self and the intellect. So you can re-experience the event without trauma by becoming an observer, and you are still able to process it and then release it. So my goal is healing, and also then integrating the humanoid personality with whatever other exceptional qualities exist, because I will tell you right now that the big commonality between experiencers is psychic ability. They all have it, and I don't care if it's a toothless man from the Bible. I don't care, or if it's a court judge, and I have treated all of these people. That is
The
that
common
is the common thread. Now, whether they're watching it in genetic lines, which I believe some groups are, I also
Okay.
believe that there are many, many varieties of aliens that we have regular contact with. Our own, in Canada, our wonderful political figure, Paul Hellyer. I don't know if you ever had him on the show. He was a lovely man, and he was at different times the Minister of Finance, and he
Mhm.
was also a vice premier and premier of Ontario. So he was a knowledgeable, wonderful man, and he was very much in the inner sanctum, if you will, of the Canadian government. And before he died, my goodness, not a month before he died, he shared with me that to his knowledge, there were at least 85 species of beings that the Canadian government was interacting with. And I don't mean just that they knew about them. These are people with like treaties and trade and who knows
Well,
what.
that's a pretty heavy statement to I mean, a
Well,
government.
yeah.
How when you say he he knew that there were 85 different species.
Mhm.
How are we getting these numbers? Are you able
I'm
to?
only, unfortunately, and of course, being a Yankee, I can't. I do have dual citizenship, but my knowledge of the machinations of the Canadian parliamentary system are limited at best. But he was a government insider.
So he
Uh,
got it from inside, is what you're
yeah, he
okay.
very much. And then he was also Paul Hellyer was also a whistleblower. He was involved in at least three of Dr. Stephen Greer's press conferences in Washington, D.C.,
Hmm.
disclosure press conferences. So, I mean, this is nothing new. You can find a lot of footage of him, discussing
Oh,
all of this,
I'm very, 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 very
ad
familiar with him.
nauseum. But I had tremendous respect for him. He was a incredibly intelligent man, and I believe him 150%.
How? What type of memories? What type of person? I know they're abductees, but
Mhm.
what causes them to come to you for help? Is it just the
Okay.
Is it just the trauma of what has occurred? And then what do you do? What is your process? Maybe that's a good way to
Okay.
put it.
Well, first of all, it's not always trauma. In fact, it's more rarely trauma.
Okay.
Mostly what it is a feeling of confusion. And I would say that most of my clients, Larry, are people in midlife where whatever memory suppressants have been used, whether it's a government incited program or whether it's ETs themselves, whatever kind of suppression mechanism they try to use, it doesn't work. And it really, after 20 years, it people start having flashbacks in the sense that you might have them if you had experienced a traumatic event
Okay.
and you're getting flashbacks. So most of the time, most of my clients are individuals who have more than one partially recalled memory. And suddenly, it seems as if it's suddenly in midlife, all of these things are starting to come up. That would be my most common
Mhm.
type of client. So what we do is, I mean, a lot of what I do is just getting these dear people to calm down
Mhm.
because they are incredibly stressed. A lot of them don't sleep. They're either afraid to sleep because that's when a lot of activity happens, or they're working with ETs who don't understand sleep. So one of the two, is happening. So these poor people are usually not sleeping. They have tremendous concerns for their sanity because let's face it, I'm a hypnotherapist. I'm the last chance Texaco. You know, I mean, they no doubt many of these people have seen psychiatrists who have said, "Well, you're completely normal. I'm not sure what the issue is."
Are they afraid they're imagining it and you're helping them to realize they're not imagining it?
I think that's a huge part of it. I think because these experiences, a lot of them sort of live in that how can I put it? That shadowy world of being between being awake and being asleep. It's they when people are taken from the time they are small children, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say something that I believe, and I may have arguments for other people. That's okay. I don't think there is such a thing as a person who has one encounter experience.
Uh, and I was going to ask you that question myself. How often are these individuals coming to you with multiple experiences?
Almost once we get in there, almost I have never worked with anyone who has had one experience. Never.
Okay.
So by the time people come to me, they may only be recalling part of one, but and you have to remember my job when I get into the areas of regression, I have to be completely vanilla. And I
Mhm.
record everything. I
Mhm.
record every session. If you've ever seen, video recordings of the way Mary Rodwell works, it's almost identical to the way that I work. So it's very important to not uh, make suggestions, to not imply anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I can, because once you start doing that, then you take away the validity of your questions if you suggest and whatnot. So
Absolutely. I
I,
agree. I'm a really like you. I mean, I sometimes think about how does a police officer um, uh, ask questions that
mm-hmm,
are not leading, that are
mm-hmm.
fact based. So, and sometimes, and I haven't done this for a while. I have been called in to work for the police department, not in any metaphysical way, but to hypnotize someone
Mm.
who may have seen something but maybe doesn't realize what they've seen, like a license plate number or something like that.
And in the
Yeah.
work that I did, we used that quite a bit. But hey,
Yeah.
guess what? We're coming up on our next break already. So stay with us, folks. I'm here with Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, hypnotherapist. Stay with us. We've got a lot more to talk about. We'll be back after these messages.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com.
simultv.com.
And we are back with my guest tonight, Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, up there in beautiful Toronto, Canada, having a fascinating discussion on hypnotherapy, regression, life therapy with abductees. Question for, first of all, I do have some significant experience with the hypnotherapists that do regression therapy in my work in my police work, and that mainly had to do with child victims. So I do understand how that works. So and it's been very successful, I might add. And that's why you were talking about the leading questions and whatnot. I totally understand that. But one question that comes to mind here, I've actually got a couple. I got several, but I'll start with this one. How do the visitors from wherever they're coming from whatever dimension or galaxy that they're coming from, how do they pick individual folks? Have you been able to discern a criteria? I know you mentioned that they all tend to have psychic ability, but is there any other criteria? How do they know who to pick? I guess is the question.
Well, I think that is a very complex question because there probably are a lot of different answers. Now, if you're talking about the Zeta Reticulites, they have always been looking for genetic material since the Roswell crash. And so, the more, horrific things that I used to hear about, and by the way, I almost never at this point in my career encounter someone who has had one of those terrible gray driven ova extracting terrifying experiences. That seems to have been confined to certainly the Truman Agreement and the Eisenhower Agreement, and those types of incidents. I would have to have somebody well into their 60s to have been really old enough before that timed out. So that's one goal, And I think that the grays, the zeta reticulites, were not really looking for genetic lines of psychic ability. I think they were just looking for raw material. So in that case, there were probably a number of random abductions, such as Betty and Barney Hill, and and that kind of thing. So that's the zetas. That's one group. But I also believe that we are connecting etherically with, if you wish to say, our cousins, in a sense.
Mhm.
My own belief system, and I would not question anyone else's belief system, certainly. I believe that there were infusions of DNA into the early hominids, the five fingers of man, if you will. And in some cases, this was very highly structured, as in the case of the Anunnaki, who needed,
Mhm.
slave labor to work their gold mines. So we are actually, genetic cousins, if you will, with many beings in the Lyran system, particularly from what I hear. So you're talking about the Aiel, the Lyrans, and even the Pleiadians, and even the Anunnaki are considered Lyrans because of their own genetic history. So um, I think there is a sense of responsibility from some of these beings at having maybe really effed up before. And
Okay.
dare I say it? I mean, we know the Anunnaki were engaging in nuclear war with each other. Otherwise, we wouldn't have vitrified sand all over Iraq and Iran. So we know that these things happen. We can still get Geiger counter readings off of the old sites of Sodom and Gomorrah. There were nukes that they were nuking each other. So I think that they have, some of the beings that visit us have a tremendous sense of history and of responsibility and want to assist us. However, um, I tend to think that and again, this is from what I've heard. I'm not writing anything. This is just from what I've heard. There appears to be a type of galactic federation, in the sense of a Star Trek United Federation of Planets. This appears to be a real organism. And they even have a major ship, which is of course cloaked at all times, which is monitoring us because we are dangerous. We're like 3-year-olds with blowtorches. I mean,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
dangerous beings right now. But from everything I hear, well, we say, well, why don't they come down and solve hunger and quell all this war and blah. Well, there is, like, again, like Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek universe, there is a hands-off policy. We have to pull on our own big boy and big girl pants. We have to solve our problems. We have to decide to accept and not exclude. And this is the only way that our planet and the beings on our planet will be able to arise to the fifth dimension.
And I understand exactly where you're coming from. Let me ask you this question though. Because most of my work is in the ghost field.
Ah,
Okay.
yes. Well, I do
And
that too. I
well,
love it.
we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But what I
Okay.
want to ask you is a question that I would always get is, how do you prove this? So that's the question I'm going to pose to you right now. That
Mm.
you have just unloaded a huge bit of information about where we're at as far in this real world, and that a real
Mhm.
world is really not
Mhm.
what we think it is.
Mhm.
Where's the proof to that?
Well, now here we have the conundrum because we don't have proof in the sense of there are not craft landing every day and saying
Mhm.
hello, here we
Mhm.
are. I think to a certain extent that had been tried. Now I know that there was a wonderful being named Valiant Thor who claimed to be Venusian, and he was here for 3 or 4 years and tried to get Eisenhower to do things about, food and this and that, and all that he heard was, well, we'll have a financial collapse if we don't continue with fossil fuels. So, apparently Valiant Thor went back to his thing. I think now that disclosure is a grassroots movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's individuals like yourself, Larry, and all of the other, commentators and Rob and everybody else who works at X Zone Radio. I think we are all what I would have to call midwives of disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
So although I cannot say that I have proof, because sometimes even in a past life regression, if the person gives you enough information about a recent lifetime, you can actually make connections and find
Sure.
some provable things. This is an improbable process, and also, as if it wasn't complicated enough, I have to say that at least half of the activities that people experience in their encounters with extraterrestrial beings are what I would call astral events. They are either projecting themselves, they are being taken and leaving their bodies and going on the craft, which is all resonating at a higher vibration. So it's all vibration, right? That everything we're in the dense. We are in a dense, slogging about in the Neolithic slime.
Mhm.
But there are other dimensions that are, in fact, our idea of heaven.
Well,
I've heard many people who talk about the interlife or where they go after death. Many of them have talked about seeing um, extremely alien beings in what we would call heaven.
well, that's a question I want to ask you. One of the other questions I want to ask you is this a dimensional issue?
Yeah.
There's a lot. Our physics, our science, absolutely is convinced that beings can't travel the distance they need to,
Yeah.
and with our understanding of science.
Yeah.
So, is this, in your opinion, a dimensional issue? So,
I think a lot of it is. Now, there are beings like beings from the planet Serpo that Len Kasten wrote about so eloquently that have mastered space travel, but I still think that involves some kind of folding of space and interdimensional activity of some sort. Let me just throw this at you. I was just reading this amazing book by Grant Cameron about what is going on out at Mount Shasta. And for 30 years, Mount Shasta, well, more than that, but by our contemporary understanding, for 30 years there's been amazing activity going on at Mount Shasta. People see craft landing, taken off, they've seen fleets of craft. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So there is a group that has been working with the individuals who come to Mount Shasta, the ETs, and they are saying that they are Pleiadians. So what they are doing is, and what is the word for it that they use? Oh God, forgive me. I'll probably think of it in a moment. But there is a word for what they are creating. But the Pleiadians are bringing an interdimensional space or doorway or anteroom up to Mount Shasta and allowing up to 30 people to get in to that space.
people meaning
You and
human.
me, the people in the group, the people that
Okay.
participate, they're using Stephen Greer's technique, so they have a rather Vedic, they're chanting and they're doing whatever they can to lift the vibration, but then apparently the beings are able to come through and manifest this kind of room. So everybody marches in there and they experience enhanced thoughts, but it's an exercise because eventually they will be able to walk through that door and into a more rarefied dimension where communication and everything else is open and free. But for right now, they're bringing this kind of anteroom and allowing up to 30 people to actually get in it. And apparently it can be seen. So this is Grant Cameron has just written quite a book on that. So
Well, how, with all of these people, one thing in law enforcement I found, if more than one person knows a story, it's not a secret.
right.
So how long do you think it's going to be before this breaks out, before it is no longer something that can be hidden? I mean, too many people apparently know about this.
Well, it's broken out already. It's just that we're unfortunately, there's a lot of suppression by the major news sources are not going to promote this. The last thing
Why?
because I believe there is tremendous fear about us preserving the environment and the loss of fossil fuels and alternative energy sources. I think it's about the money.
It's always about the money. And speaking of about the money,
Follow the money. Isn't that what you say?
Speaking of the money, we've got to go to our next commercial break here. So this is just going so fast. So stay with us, folks.
Okay.
For the last session of Paranormal Stakeout tonight. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Question: what is the name of the unique blend of coffee you get that has been formulated by a neurologist, a neurobiologist, and a pharmaceutical chemist? Answer: you get Beautiful Mind Coffee, a unique coffee blend that tastes great and has herbal ingredients that your brain will love, and it is not just coffee, it's brainalicious. Dr. Rathbone, Dr. Jang, and Dr. Winslow, the scientific team that created Beautiful Mind Coffee, decided to collaborate on a coffee focusing on brain health. As for those herbal ingredients found in Beautiful Mind Coffee, Dr. Rathbone, Dr. Jang, and Dr. Winslow, utilizing their combined extensive scientific research background, worked with many natural and herbal products until the exact formulation that is found in Beautiful Mind Coffee was created. With a unique scientific formula not found in any other coffee being sold or served, Beautiful Mind Coffee is the only coffee blend that contains 3 herbal ingredients found to aid in boosting your daily mental clarity and focus. Every cup of Beautiful Mind Coffee contains scientifically formulated amounts of maca root powder, green tea extract, and American ginseng, all supporting good brain health. Taking care of your brain's health now can help delay or prevent the onset of cognitive dysfunction, including dementia, Alzheimer's, and more general memory loss as you get older, just by enjoying the delicious flavor of our roasted coffee and herbal ingredients found exclusively in Beautiful Mind Coffee. Did you know that cognitive dysfunction also refers to deficits in attention, verbal and non-verbal learning, short-term and working memory, visual and auditory processing, problem-solving, processing speed, and motor functioning? For more on Beautiful Mind Coffee, the 3 scientists who formulated Beautiful Mind Coffee, and more details on the 3 unique herbal ingredients in Beautiful Mind Coffee, visit www.beautifulmindcoffee.ca. Beautiful Mind Coffee is now available online at amazon.ca and amazon.com. To order Beautiful Mind Coffee, visit www.beautifulmindcoffee.ca today.
And we are back on Paranormal Stakeout with my guest tonight, Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. I want to remind everybody to check out Indian River Hauntings and the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. I'll get it out on our websites at paranormalfbi.com and indianriverhauntings.com. Check us out at our YouTube at Indian River Hauntings 2341. Also, go ahead and do the xbn.net site and check out all the other great programming on the networks. There's a lot of terrific shows out there. And Lesley, how can folks get a hold of you?
Oh, well, I'm eminently easy to find.
Okay.
You can always email me, and I always respond. It may not take me, I may not be able to do it immediately, but I will always get back to everyone that emails me. And I want to hear about your issues. If you have a question, this is very sensitive stuff. and I'm here as a sounding board, in part. So you can always email me at Lesley, Lesley, the female spelling, Lesley at lightworkhypnosis.com, and that's all one word, lightworkhypnosis.com. And you can also find me on Facebook easily as either Lesley Mitchell-Clarke or under Lightwork Hypnosis. So
And you have a book out too, don't you?
I do. It's called Intersections, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. And what it is, it's the journey of one specific experiencer from the first time that I saw him all the way through the whole process. So I think what this book does is it really draws in the reader into actually what this therapy is like and what we discover. A lot of transcriptions, really cool. And you can get it on Amazon, Amazon.com, anywhere you Amazon.
So it's Intersection, True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. So check that out, folks.
Thank you.
Now, getting back to our discussion.
Yes.
I find it mind-boggling. Would you say 85 different species?
Yeah.
And I just find
and that was
mind-boggling.
years ago. And that was years ago. So I think that's conservative. And remember too that anything that Canada is doing, we are completely in bed with the United States. So there are no, there's no wall there really. We are in bed with the US. So whatever is going on, on our end, it's even more so in the US.
As a rule, I got to say I'm really proud that we're friends with the Canadians overall. They're
well,
our
we
brothers
have
and
to
sisters,
be.
so
We are the caretakers of North America right now.
But getting back to your work, and you've done a lot of it, and
Yes.
there's so many more questions I have to ask. We may have to have you back on the show even.
Oh, I'd love
But
that.
how many different in your work, how many different species have you actually been able to identify through your clients?
All right. Well, there are apparently many different types of grays. I don't think that they are always fully biological, if that makes sense. I think they are, at least in part, AI. And the reason for that is people are not able to get any conversation from them except limited words. Because
Like
everything is
alien robots.
everything is telepathic, when we get out of our realm, everything's telepathic. So there are little tiny guys that are maybe 3 foot tall, and there are other grays that are a bit taller, and then there are some grays that look even quite humanoid, and then we would be talking about, say, the serpents from or the ebens rather. So, and then also there are grays that are every bit as tall as we are, and they are more white colored, but they have the extended head. So there's four. And I'm not saying, boy, there's a million more, but for from the beings that I have heard about, there are 4 types of grays, going from robotic little guys to rather bossy big guys.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I have heard about reptilians, and again, many different types. And I know that, this is I hate to get into the reptilian thing because this is, David Jacobs and this paranoid thinking, but I'll tell you, I think we as mammalians have a very difficult time with life forms that have come out of another stream. I think a big part of this reptilian thing is simply a deep-seated genetic discomfort, because there are good reptilians, there are bad reptilians. There are reptilians that we have agreements with. So again, it's like as above, so below, so I'm sorry, go ahead, Larry.
No, too quick. I've just got so many questions I want to ask. You have to forgive me. Are you familiar with any aliens that are color a blue color?
This is so out there because I was just talking about this the other day. And I'm not saying that these beings don't exist. Believe me, I'm not. But in the scope of my treatment, which has been, oh God, how much you think all these years? I have never once heard about these blue avians. Now
Avians, okay.
I have heard about beings that are very humanoid. In fact, it's even been said that beings of Pleiadian origin, hence the term blue bloods, looked
Mhm.
blue because their blood was copper based and not iron based. So I have heard of beings that look, completely humanoid, but their skin has a blue tinge. That I've
Any
heard about.
any feline,
I've had people talk about that, but very few. But I
okay.
have heard people talk about that.
Mhm.
I think anything's possible. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And remember that some beings are really light beings, and they assume bodies or manifest bodies to make it easier for them to engage with us.
Okay. Have you ever seen an alien or a UFO? Have you ever experienced that yourself? With all these
I
folks that you've
have.
talked to? You
Oh
have?
man.
Okay.
Oh, Larry, I don't know if there's time to tell this story, but I absolutely have. I was a young actor. I was away at summer stock in the Black Hills of South Dakota. That's where the
Mhm.
Rushmore heads are, but it's also a very sacred Indian land.
Mhm.
I shouldn't say, God help me, Native American land, Aboriginal land. It's sacred to those to the Lakota Sioux,
Mhm.
and part of that is they have a huge history of sightings and what have you. And I had an experience where I met a young lady who was also in the company, and she had a second job where she was a psychic communicator with ET beings, and she worked for the government. She lived in Las Vegas most of the year, and they would fly
Mhm.
her out there in one of those plane wrap airplanes out to, Dreamland or what have you, one of the bases out there in the middle of the Mojave, and she would sit in a room with a bunch of other psychics and communicate. And so the ETs and their craft were following her around all summer. And she had a car, and so she drove me into town, out of town. I saw craft sometimes close enough to really perceive windows.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I was sort of incidental. I don't consider myself an experiencer because I don't have the child. I
Mhm.
was simply, incidental in that way,
But
I think.
you still experienced the events.
Yes.
Tell tell me something. Is this generational? For example, if I was to have an experience, does that mean my children are more prone to have an
Wow.
experience?
I gotta tell you, Larry, it's hugely generational.
Why?
When I get people in my chair, and one of the things I ask them, after we've been working, I say,
Mhm.
Did your mother or father or sibling ever tell you about any kind of unusual experience they might have had?" And 9 times out of 10, I hear some kind of story.
Why do you think that is?
Especially, well, because I think some beings are tracking either their own bloodlines as they trickle down today, or psychic ability, or some combination of both, because generally what I hear about is through the maternal line. Like, "Oh, my mother had this happen."
Okay.
Now, this could just be our sexist bullshit, right? Where men had to be, men, I mean, I'm from the 50s. I'm a fossil, but men had to suppress their emotions. If my brother was going to cry, my dad would say, and this is horrible on so many levels, and I apologize for the political incorrectness. My dad would say, "Be a brave little Indian, don't cry." And my poor
Mhm.
brother, God knows what had happened. He couldn't cry. So I don't. It's hard to know when you get back a little bit farther whether there was many male experiences and it just wasn't discussed, if you know what
Mhm.
I mean.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
do hear about a lot of mother, grandmother, great grandmother going back in the maternal line, and of course we all know that mitochondrial DNA is most likely what's being followed.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's so many other directions I'd like to go with tonight. Um, do you th do you think that when you said that they are tracing their own line, am I to understand that there's been some sort of genetic mixing of genetics?
I believe so.
And these are kids. So we've got hybrid children. I guess that's where I'm
Yes,
going.
we do. There are many of the experiencers that I work with have been taken on board craft and shown their hybrid children that have been achieved through, the extraction of sperm. I mean, there was never any kind of normalcy to it in the way that we would think of it, but the children have been created, and they want you to hold them and talk to them, and some of the children are very humanoid looking, like they could really pass. Maybe they have a slightly higher forehead. I mean, really, and some of the children look very much like some variety of gray, if you will.
Is the government familiar with these folks and keep tabs on these children that may be hybrids?
Boy, Larry, that is such a big question. We really should have a show where we talk about the black ops and the secret space program and the government. That is that I would not exclude government involvement from any aspect of ufology. I would not, with what I have heard. And I will also I will also have to say that the worst things that I have heard, as far as in regressions, tortures, the worst things that I have heard from experiencers under hypnosis were conducted by some type of military ET combination. But I don't want to leave on such a sad note, but I think we
Yeah.
can feel positive, because my God, Larry, upwards of 80% of the experiences that people are having, and this is confirmed by all the
Well,
research, are
has been positive.
are
Okay.
positive. So let's keep that in mind.
Okay, and on that note, unfortunately, we have run out of time, so we're gonna have to chat some more, because I've got so many other questions, especially your work and perhaps the world of ghosts and spirits, apparitions, as well as cryptids. So I'd like to chat with you more, but
let us.
Okay, well, we will do that. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was a really interesting conversation. I look forward to speaking with you again. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for joining us here tonight on Paranormal Stakeout. Remember, check out xzbn.net for the X Zone Broadcast Network programs that are out there. Great shows. Make sure you see them. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourself, love your family, and we'll see you on the other side. Have a good night.